"Look who's over there, the millionaire's ex, now waiting for the bus with 3 kids tugging at her skirt." The laughter echoed down the street like sharp blades slicing through the air. 2 men stood on the sidewalk, mocking loudly. The millionaire, sitting in his imported car at a red light, froze when he turned his head. There she was. Plain clothes, worn by time, hair tied carelessly, skin tired and pale. And beside her, 3 boys. Small, but with the same eyes, the same jawline, the same posture he saw staring back at him in the mirror every morning. For a split second, his heart raced. No, it can't be, he thought, clenching his fists on the leather steering wheel. The horns behind him broke his trance. The light was green, but he didn't move. He stayed still, watching that scene like a ghost from the past, collecting an unpaid debt. "Mom, is the bus late?" one of the boys asked, shifting the backpack on his shoulders. She bent down, touched his cheek gently, and answered softly, "It's coming, honey. We just have to wait a little longer." The millionaire swallowed hard. The way she spoke, that tenderness in her tone, was exactly the same as when they were together. But now the contrast was brutal. He was in an expensive suit, shiny watch on his wrist, inside a car worth more than her whole life. And she was there, standing on the curb, waiting for public transport. The men kept laughing. "Look at that. 3 boys just like him. Do you think she told them she's the boss's ex? If it were me, I'd already be trying to squeeze some money out of him." Every word burned inside like fire. He couldn't stand being the subject of ridicule, especially tied to her, and even more with those 3 boys. His exact reflection. He took a deep breath, switched off the engine, and opened the door. The metallic thud made everyone look. All eyes turned toward him, including hers. For a moment time froze. She saw him, he saw her, and the boys, curious, stayed quiet, watching this tall, imposing man step closer. The millionaire walked firmly, but inside he was at war. Pride and fear, anger and disbelief. Each step felt heavier than the last. "Good afternoon," he said in a cold, cutting tone. She didn't reply. She just gripped her children's hands tighter, as if instinctively shielding them. One of the boys whispered to his mother, curious, "Mom, who is that man?" The question hung in the air. The millionaire felt a shiver crawl up his spine. How could he answer? How could he deny? How could he pretend not to notice the identical features on their faces? He looked again, this time with more focus. The way they fixed the backpack strap, their suspicious glance, even how they scratched their chins. Everything screamed a truth he didn't want to face. The men on the sidewalk muttered, but without laughter now. The mood had shifted. It was tense. It was silent. "Did you really have to stop here?" she finally said, not meeting his eyes, her voice steady but heavy with resentment. He swallowed and replied, "I just found it interesting." That word sounded like provocation. She raised her eyes, and for a moment let slip all the pain she'd been hiding for years. A look that said, "You don't have the right to be here." The kids, still confused, pressed closer against her legs. The oldest dared to say, "He looks like us, doesn't he, Mom?" The millionaire's chest tightened. It was like a punch straight to the heart. She quickly bent down, stroked all 3, and whispered, "Don't say that. Let's wait quietly, okay?" But it was too late. The boy's innocent question echoed in his mind, mixed with the laughter he'd heard minutes earlier. Suddenly, the millionaire felt something he hadn't in a long time. Shame. The pricey clothes no longer felt comfortable. The luxury car parked by the corner seemed like useless weight. For the first time in years, no contract, no bank account, no trophy could shield him from that moment. And deep down, one doubt ate at him like poison. What if they really are my kids? He stayed silent, but his gaze was already lost in the past, back to the dirt road where it all began. The smell of bread from the bakery, the rusty gate of her house, his bike leaning on the wall. It was another world. Before the tinted glass, before the tailored suits, before the watch worth more than every paycheck he'd earned up to 25. "You're going to make it, I know you will," she used to say, sitting on the curb, her hands stained with ink from the pen she used for her dream of becoming a teacher. "Just promise that when it happens, you won't forget where you came from." He promised, swore, staring at the orange evening sky, and for a while he truly believed he'd never break that vow. Then came the first odd jobs, handing out flyers, unloading trucks, selling phone cases at the street market. She always showed up carrying a bottle of water and a smile that melted away any tiredness. When he ran short on money to pay for the technical course, she was the one who sold her basic phone to cover the fee. "If it's for your future, it's worth it," she said, shrugging as if it didn't hurt. He spent long hours studying spreadsheets on the old computer, building cost models, learning to calculate margin, cash flow, projections. She copied by hand the notes he dictated because the keyboard kept failing. They laughed whenever the monitor went black and came back after a slap on the side. "One day, we'll laugh at this in another way," she said, with a huge screen. That day came. First, one small client, then two. An unexpected proposal, a local investor who spotted in him a rare sense for numbers and deals. The makeshift office turned into a room with air conditioning and a glass window. And then came the changes he pretended not to notice. When he wore his first suit, she cried with joy. "You look great," she whispered, fixing the crooked tie. By the second suit, he started coming home late. By the third, he had learned that success comes with group talks, loud laughs with tall glasses, and business cards that open doors where promises could not. "We're still us, right?" she asked one evening at the door, when he parked the borrowed car 2 blocks away so no one would know he lived there. He replied with a rushed kiss and "Of course we are," that didn't even convince himself. Then came the parties, the invites. Smiles from people who once ignored him, now stretching their hands with eagerness. Presentations with shiny slides and easy applause. He discovered the comfort of being noticed. He also found that the louder the world got, the quieter the sound of memories became. "There's going to be an important dinner," he told her on a Friday. "Clients." She cooked a dish he always loved, waited until late, set the table with silly care. He never showed up. At 2 in the morning, he texted, "Didn't work out. I'll explain tomorrow." The next day, he didn't explain. And that became the routine. When the first big contract landed, he bought a watch. He didn't need it, but he wanted to see victory on his wrist. She baked carrot cake for his parents, proud. "Our boy made it," his mother said, teary-eyed. He smiled, but inside thought the cake was too simple for the new kitchen he had seen in a magazine. The fights began in silence. No yelling, just pauses, absences, short replies. "You're distant," she said, not accusing. "It's just a phase," he muttered without looking up. "I need to be with people who open doors for me." She stayed quiet, staring at her hands. "Don't I open doors for you?" He wanted to say yes, that she was the door where it all started, but the words died with the ping of a notification, an invite to some fancy opening. Their last night together came without warning. He arrived too dressed up for a Wednesday, she noticed. "Who is it?" He pretended not to understand. "What do you mean?" He smiled without humor. "I think we need a break." The word break fell between them like a blade. "A break for what?" "For me to figure out what I want." She took a deep breath, holding back tears with the same dignity one holds a full glass. "And what is it that you want?" He picked the easy way out. "I don't know, but it's not this." He left carrying the echo of his own cowardice. He didn't see when she moved back to her parents' house, when she took extra jobs, when she doubled shifts, when she cut neighbors' hair for a few coins, when she learned to stretch meals to last, when she crossed out from her notebook the little luxuries that were just dreams, a new book, a blue dress, a bus trip to the beach. He didn't see because he didn't want to. The big city has enough corners to hide from those who know us. Months later, he ran into her on the street with a belly she tried to cover with a coat. He looked at the ground. She looked straight ahead. "Are you okay?" he asked automatically. "I'm fine," she answered, though her voice said otherwise. "Do you need anything?" "No," she said, clutching the coat. He moved his hand toward his pocket, as if reaching for some cash, but froze. Nothing would be more humiliating than reducing their story to charity. He let the gesture die. And with it, something without a name. Then came the whispers. That she had disappeared from the neighborhood parties, that she worked 2 bus rides away, that she woke before dawn, that she laughed less. He never asked. He fed off his new life like someone walking fast to avoid hearing their own conscience. That's just how it is, he told himself. Growing hurts. And growing did hurt. It left scars he polished into trophies. Partnerships closed. The company grew. Headlines came. He learned how to give interviews, how to pose from his good side, how to say polished lines about merit, resilience, and gratitude. We make ourselves, he liked to say, as if by ourselves was ever true. Until the day when, on an ordinary afternoon, a red light forced him to look outside, and there she was, like an exclamation mark that fate had drawn on the sidewalk. The memories didn't come in order. They hit like blows. Her hands stained with ink, the monitor that only worked after a smack, the simple cake, the crooked tie, the belly under the coat. And now, 3 boys with the same chin, the same stare, the same habit of scratching their jaw when thinking, just like he did in his tensest pitches. This can't be, he whispered, but the memory insisted. That night when they chose to walk away from each other, days before, weeks before. Calculations he had never made out of laziness, out of fear, out of convenience. The math he mastered at work failed in the face of what was obvious to his heart. In the present, on the sidewalk, she adjusted the strap of one boy's backpack. With a gesture he recognized the way one recognizes their own signature. A strict tenderness, a quiet strength. The same woman, stronger now, more worn, more whole without him. His throat tightened. The expensive watch weighed heavy. The car felt smaller. The men's laughter, once sharp, faded into a distant buzz. The loudest noise came from inside, the cracking of promises he had broken. "You'll make it someday," she once told him. He did make it. He just forgot to take the best of himself along. The horn behind his car blared, impatient, pulling time back into motion. He blinked, broke free of the trance, and the memories withdrew like a tide, leaving a shore full of things his pride couldn't name. When he looked at her again, he didn't see the girl on the curb. He saw a woman who had learned to stand on her own, and 3 boys who might have been waiting their whole lives to ask a simple question. He inhaled, took a step. The past walked with him, heavy, demanding receipts. The bus hadn't arrived yet. The truth had. The millionaire tried to hold up under the weight of his silence, but it was the boys who, without knowing it, dismantled every one of his defenses. They didn't say anything grand. They didn't accuse, didn't judge. They just stared. 3 pairs of eyes, bright, alive, curious. Eyes that didn't blink, that studied him from head to toe as if trying to figure out why this man in a sharp suit had stopped right in front of them. The oldest, maybe around 9, squeezed the strap of his backpack and frowned, exactly the way the millionaire did in meetings when he doubted a proposal. That small gesture hit him like an invisible punch. It was his reflection in a younger version. The middle one, about 7, couldn't stop staring at the shiny watch on his wrist. Every second, his eyes followed the hand moving, hypnotized. He remembered the first time he wore an expensive watch, how he couldn't stop glancing at his wrist, hardly believing something so valuable could be his. The resemblance burned. The youngest, maybe 5, didn't hide it. He was smiling. A wide, open smile, the same one he used to flash when he still believed the world could be conquered with kindness. It was as if he had gone back in time, as if he was staring at 3 versions of himself. He swallowed hard. His heart, trained to stay steady in front of investors and reporters, was racing, stumbling almost. "They," he murmured, not finishing. Their mother, sensing the danger of any word slipping out, leaned toward them. "Stay quiet, the bus will be here soon." But the boys didn't obey right away. Curiosity was stronger than any order. The oldest stepped forward and asked, fearless, "Mister, Do you work at a bank? The firm but innocent voice cut the air. The millionaire blinked, puzzled. Why? The boy shrugged. Because you look important. Everyone who looks important works at a bank. The little laugh that followed sounded sweet, but inside the millionaire's chest, it echoed like a hammer on glass. Because years ago, he had asked the very same thing to a well-dressed neighbor, and now someone was asking him. The middle boy stepped closer too. Is that watch real? He hesitated. He was used to answering questions about million-dollar deals, huge projects, mergers and acquisitions, but he had no idea what to say to a child who could be his own. It is, he answered awkwardly. The boy grinned, amazed. One day I'll have one like that. And then the youngest tugged at his suit jacket without hesitation. Tiny fingers left dust on the expensive fabric. The millionaire froze. No one ever dared touch him like that. But the boy, without malice, lifted his gaze and asked softly, "Do you like chocolate ice cream?" The millionaire blinked twice, stunned. It was the most unexpected, the most absurd question, but it was the one that broke every wall, because he remembered. He remembered being the same age, asking that to his cousins, just to start a conversation. He remembered how his father used to laugh, saying that was his favorite question. Now, 3 decades later, the very same question came from an innocent mouth, from a face carrying his own reflection. He didn't reply right away, his throat locked. But the boy insisted, "Do you?" "Because I do. It's the best thing in the world." He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. All he could do was nod, with a half-smile that barely hid the panic. The mother straightened, pulling all 3 back close to her. "That's enough. You don't need to talk to strangers." The word stranger cut through him like a knife. Stranger. He, who might have been everything but that. The boys grumbled, but they obeyed. The millionaire stood frozen, torn between stepping back and moving forward, between asking and keeping quiet. And at that moment, the oldest whispered to his brothers, loud enough for him to catch, "He walks just like me, did you notice?" The others giggled, "And his ear looks just like mine, too." That innocent laughter felt like a verdict. It was undeniable. They were his copies, tiny mirrors of a past he had tried to erase. He couldn't take it. He raised a hand to his face, pretending to adjust his sunglasses, but it was only to hide the trembling in his eyes. A knot of feelings suffocated him. Pride, shame, fear, longing. The boys, however, had already gone back to playing among themselves, kicking a stone, racing to see who would reach the mark on the ground first. And he stayed there, watching that simple, crushing scene, as if the whole world had stopped just to force him to see what he had always refused. The bus still hadn't come, but the truth had already arrived. The bus hadn't shown up, yet the air already felt like an arena ready to explode. The millionaire took another step forward. The sound of his polished shoes against the pavement echoed like a challenge. She felt it. The mother gripped her children's hands again, as if that one act could build an invisible wall around them. Her body was upright, but her eyes avoided his. It was as if she were saying, "You no longer exist in my life, and you won't take anything from me." He drew a deep breath. His voice came out low, steady, but the strain in it was impossible to miss. "Are they your children?" She didn't answer right away. She only adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and glanced toward the street, pretending to look for the bus. The silence was so heavy, even the boys noticed and grew still, puzzled. "Aren't you going to answer?" he pressed, folding his arms, trying to reclaim the posture of a businessman used to always having the last word. She lifted her eyes. The look was direct but cold. "And if they are, what difference would it make to you?" The impact hit instantly. He felt as if he had taken a punch with no chance to block. Pride and fear wrestled inside him. He tried to harden his face, but his voice betrayed a faint tremor. "It's striking. They're very much like me." She curved a faint smile, not one of joy, but of irony. "Don't worry. That resemblance won't cost you a thing." The words cut sharp. He inhaled slowly, fighting not to lose control. Around them, people were starting to notice. This wasn't just a chance meeting. There was too much tension in the air. The boys watched, clueless, as if watching a movie without following the plot. The youngest tugged at her skirt. "Mom, who is this man? Why does he talk to us like that?" She knelt down, met her son's eyes, and answered calmly, but firmly, "He's just someone from the past, my love. Nothing more." That burned. The millionaire felt the word nothing pierce like a needle. He, who was everything to so many, here was reduced to nothing. He tried to react. "You talk like I don't matter." She took a slow breath, kept her tone low, but her words were sharp as glass. "In our life you don't." For a moment, he couldn't breathe. He wasn't used to being put in his place. In business, he always had the last word. But here, in front of her, he was just a small man, trapped in a past he could never buy back. The silence grew heavier. The boys, confused, went back to kicking the stone on the ground. She stood tall, staring straight ahead, as if simply waiting for the bus. He, meanwhile, was paralyzed. He wanted to ask everything, to demand explanations, but pride held him down. Then suddenly she spoke again, without even turning her head. "Why did you come here? Curiosity, regret, or just fear of being exposed?" Each word struck like an arrow. He didn't answer. He just stared at her, knowing any excuse would sound pathetic. The distant hum of a bus engine drew closer. She got ready, fixing the straps of her children's backpacks. Instinctively, the millionaire took one more step, blocking her view of the street. Her gaze finally met his, fully. No tears, no shaking, only firmness. And in that instant, he understood. She didn't need him anymore. "Oh, ChatGPT dis." The bus horn blared. The vehicle rolled closer, kicking up dust. The boys grinned, ready to climb aboard. She raised her hand, signaling to the driver. He wanted to speak. He wanted to shout. He wanted to ask if those boys were his. But no words came. His silence said more than anything he could have spoken. At last, she let out the phrase that ended it all. "Don't come near us again." The bus stopped. The doors opened. She got on with the boys, never looking back. The millionaire stayed frozen on the sidewalk, watching the bus pull away. His chest felt heavier than ever, and her silence hurt more than any scream could. The bus left, but the millionaire couldn't move. He stood there, watching the vehicle vanish at the corner, carrying 3 boys with his own face reflected back at him. His breathing was ragged, his chest tight. For the first time in years, there was no driver, no assistant, no lawyer to step in. It was just him, the silence, and the truth burning inside. 10 minutes later, guided by some instinct he didn't even understand, he started the car and sped forward. He knew where that bus would stop next, and he knew he couldn't let that conversation die in the dust of the street. When he arrived, there they were, the mother with the 3 boys, stepping down slowly, adjusting their backpacks. She wasn't surprised to see him waiting at the corner. She just sighed, like someone who already expected the persistence. He got out of the car abruptly, slamming the door shut. People on the street turned to watch. The millionaire, always collected in public, now had eyes burning with unrest. "We need to talk." His voice came out firm, loaded with authority. She didn't flinch. She held her children's hands tightly and replied, flat, "There's nothing for us to talk about." "Yes, there is." He stepped closer, his flawless suit now damp with sweat. These boys, I want the truth." The children, startled, looked at each other. The oldest frowned and whispered, "Mom, what's happening?" She crouched down to him, forced a smile and said, "Nothing you need to worry about right now. Let's keep moving." The millionaire lost his patience. "Don't run away from me again." His voice echoed through the street, drawing even more attention. She stood slowly, her gaze steady, direct. No fear, only outrage. "Run away? Is that what you call it when someone is abandoned? When a pregnant woman is ignored by the man who swore he loved her?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Her words cut deep because they were far too true. "You think you can just show up here, years later, dripping in money, titles and power, and demand answers. Where were you when I needed you?" People nearby began murmuring. One older woman whispered to another, "He's rich, but just listen to what she's saying." The millionaire felt blood rushing hot through his veins. He couldn't stand being exposed, especially in public. "You had no right to keep this from me," he shouted, his voice nearly cracking. She let out a short, bitter laugh. "Right? And since when did you care about what was right? The day I became nothing to you, all my rights disappeared." The boys were tense. The youngest began crying, clinging to her skirt. The middle one tried to comfort his brother, while the oldest stared at the millionaire with a courage beyond his years. "Please lower your voice," she asked, shielding her children. "You're scaring them." He took a shaky breath, trying to regain control, but the wound was too raw. "Are they my children?" he asked, this time quieter, but with his eyes locked on hers, as if his life depended on her answer. She looked straight at him, serious. "You don't get to ask that now." "Yes, I do," his reply trembled. "I need to know. They deserve to know. They do deserve it." For the first time her voice rose, trembling with emotion. "But not from you, not from someone who turned his back when it was easier to disappear than to take responsibility." A thick silence fell. The whispers stopped. Even the wind seemed to halt. The millionaire's eyes blurred. He who never let emotions show now stood face to face with a truth he couldn't control. The boys, not fully grasping, still felt the weight of the moment. The oldest stepped forward. "Mom, is he our dad?" She closed her eyes for a second. It was the question she dreaded most. The millionaire held his breath, his heart pounding. But she didn't answer. She just pulled them all against her, hugging them as a shield. And with a trembling voice, she said to the millionaire, "You don't deserve that answer, not yet." He felt his knees weaken. He was at the breaking point, and everything he had built, power, wealth, reputation, meant nothing on that street. Because here, he wasn't the millionaire. He was just a man, standing in front of the consequences he had tried to forget. The street felt frozen. No one dared to break the silence left after those words. The millionaire, used to ruling over boardrooms, now felt small in front of that woman and the three boys clinging to her legs. She drew a deep breath, tightened her grip on the youngest son's hand, and stared at the man she once loved. Her tone wasn't of furious rage, but of strength. Every word carried memories, wounds that had never healed. "You want the truth? Then listen. Listen once, because I won't say it again." He stayed silent, just nodded, his heart racing. She began, "When you walked away, I wasn't left alone. I was left with bills, with debts, with shame. I was left with a belly growing and neighbors asking where the father was. And you know what my answer was? Silence. Because I wasn't going to beg for respect from anyone." He tried to cut in. "I didn't know you were—" She raised her hand, slicing through his words. "Don't you dare say you didn't know. You saw me, on that corner, with the coat pulled tight. You looked, you turned away, and you pretended it wasn't your problem. That was the day I realized I was on my own." People around them murmured. The millionaire felt his face burn. She kept going, steady. "While you were at dinners, I was sewing clothes for neighbors. While you signed contracts, I stayed up nights fighting fevers. While you posed for magazines, I held 3 babies at once, not knowing if I'd have money for milk the next morning." He dropped his eyes. I didn't know there were 3. Her laugh was bitter. "Of course you didn't. You never bothered to ask. For you, it was easier to imagine I had vanished, easier to believe the past was erased. But it wasn't. The past grew. It gained faces, it gained voices, and now it stands right here in front of you." The boys looked at her, not understanding everything but feeling the weight of her words. The oldest held her hand tighter, as if to protect her. "You made promises, remember?" she fired back. "You promised you'd never leave me. You promised that when money came, I'd be the first to be proud. You promised I'd never be left behind." Each word fell like stones. He remembered every promise. Every night he had sworn things under a cracked ceiling, full of cheap dreams. He tried to explain, "I was young, I didn't know what I was doing." She shook her head. Don't use youth as an excuse. You knew exactly what you were doing when you chose to trade me for the easy life, for fake applause, for parties that ended at dawn. You knew. He breathed heavily, trying to hold back tears. He had never cried in public, but his chest felt ready to burst. She stepped closer, so near he could smell her simple perfume mixed with the sweat of daily struggle. You have no idea what it's like to see three faces just like yours every day, while knowing the man behind that face turned his back. No idea what it's like to explain why there isn't a father at the table. You talk about rights, but the one who lost all rights was you. The millionaire's knees weakened. He, who never admitted defeat, was now standing in front of the greatest failure of his life, moral failure. The youngest, not understanding, tugged at his mother's skirt and asked softly, "Mom, why is he crying?" She crouched down, took a breath, and stroked her son's face. "Because sometimes people realize too late what they've lost." The millionaire closed his eyes. Tears slipped down, discreet but undeniable. Around them people whispered louder, but it no longer mattered. The whole world could be watching. Nothing hurt more than the raw truth standing before him. He tried to speak, but his voice cracked. I messed up. I don't know what to say." She shook her head, her eyes wet but steady. "You don't need to say anything. There are no words that fix years of absence." Silence fell like a verdict. Only the distant bark of a dog and the wind dragging dust across the street could be heard. At last, he looked at the three boys, and for the first time, he didn't see them as copies. He saw them as lives, as responsibility, as chances for love he had thrown away. She turned her back, ready to leave with her children. But before walking off, she launched the final arrow. Wealth doesn't buy back the past, and it doesn't buy respect either. He stood there, unable to reply, his chest heavy, his soul shattered. The scene ended there, but inside him the conflict had only just begun. The millionaire stayed still, rooted to the spot, as she walked away with the boys. Her steps were firm, as if each one was a final sentence. He, in contrast, felt his legs heavy, like invisible chains pulling him down. Her words echoed over and over in his mind. "You knew, you promised. Then you turned your back." He shut his eyes, and suddenly the memory struck like a punch. The carrot cake she had brought to his mother with that shy smile, hoping to be accepted. The time she spent hours copying reports by hand because the computer froze on every page. The night she held his hand while he cried in frustration for not being taken seriously at a meeting. "You're capable. I believe in you," she used to say. And now, years later, every word felt like a debt unpaid. He drew a deep breath, but the flood of memory didn't stop. He saw himself the first time he wore a real suit, remembered her fixing the crooked tie, laughing as she said, "You look like one of those businessmen from a TV show, only real." That night, she believed in him more than he believed in himself, and he had traded her for the glow of people who had never been there when he had nothing. The millionaire opened his eyes, and there were the boys, running ahead of their mother. They laughed, even after witnessing that confrontation. Children always find room for innocence, but to him each laugh was heavy. He couldn't stop thinking, "They could have laughed with me. I could have been there." One of the boys kicked a stone and chased after it. The clumsy, simple gesture made his heart ache. It was the same way he had been as a child, playing ball in the street, improvising because he had no cleats. He saw himself in that run. He saw the childhood he could have shared. The weight of conscience became unbearable. He, who always had ready answers for investors, clients, and reporters, now had only questions without end. What if I had stayed? What if I had kept the promise? What if I had held that hand instead of letting go? Each what if was like a stone being stacked on his chest. The street voices faded away. All he heard was the sound of his own memories. The night she sold her phone to pay for his course. The tight hug that kept him from giving up. The way she said, "We will make it," instead of "You will make it." He realized he had never been alone until the day he chose to be. Tears threatened again. He glanced around, trying to pull himself together. It felt strange. He had always feared looking weak in front of partners and rivals, but now he didn't care if strangers saw him cry. Maybe because in that moment the crowd didn't matter. What mattered was the invisible court she had opened, with 3 living witnesses who mirrored his face. The guilt weighed like never before. It wasn't just children he might have lost. It was birthdays, first words, first steps, messy drawings, fevers in the night, notebooks from school, moments that don't come back, moments no money can ever buy. He tried to convince himself he hadn't known, that he wasn't sure, but the memories betrayed him. He had known. He always knew. He had just chosen not to face it, chosen to bury the truth under contracts and numbers. And now, here it was. The boy's eyes, her silence, the judgment of his own memory. The millionaire leaned against the car, breathing heavily. For the first time, he felt no pride in his story. For the first time, the word success sounded empty. An old man who had been watching came closer and murmured, "Money doesn't buy peace, son. You can have everything and still lose what matters." The millionaire didn't answer. He just nodded, too drained to speak. As he watched his ex and the boys walk away, he felt something shifting inside him. It wasn't just regret. It was fear. Fear that it was too late to do anything. Fear that life had already passed, leaving only a bill too large to pay. He closed his eyes once more, and in the dark he saw only 3 smiling faces, each one his own. The millionaire quickly wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his suit. He couldn't let anyone see him weak. Pride, his old compass, spoke louder again. He pressed his lips together, inhaled deeply, and strode forward until he caught up with them. She stopped, turned slowly, and folded her arms, already expecting his persistence. The boys, tired, leaned against the wall, watching quietly. "You think you can just treat me like this?" he said, his voice carrying a forced authority. "I'm not just anyone. I'm a respected man. I built all of this with hard work." She raised her eyebrow, almost with pity, and replied, "And what's the point of all that respect if you can't even face what you left behind?" The blow landed, but he stayed standing. "I have enough money to give them everything they need. Private school, doctors, trips. You don't have to worry anymore. I can fix this right now." The words sounded like a business deal. Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can buy years of absence with school fees? You think you can pay to erase the nights when they asked why they didn't have a father?" He hardened his gaze. "I'm offering what no one else can give." She gave a cold half smile. "What they need, you never offered: presents. The rest, I gave, with little, with sacrifice, but I gave, and they're alive, strong, happy, without you." The children watched in silence until the oldest, with surprising courage, spoke. "Mom already gives us everything. We don't need you." The millionaire blinked, stunned. He wasn't ready to hear that from a child. "What did you say?" The boy repeated, steady. "We don't need you." The youngest clung to his mother's leg, as if to hide, but the middle one added, "You have the same face as us, but you don't feel the same." His heart almost stopped. It was as if the boys saw beyond blood, beyond looks. They knew instinctively that the real bond couldn't be bought. He tried to push back, forcing his arrogant tone. "You're just kids. You don't know what you're talking about." His ex laughed, but it was bitter. "They know more than you ever did, because they understand what real love is. And love isn't traded on the stock exchange." The crowd around them began to murmur again, indignant at his posture. The millionaire felt the pressure rising, but he still refused to bend. Pride still held him. "I can change this. I can make up for the past," he said, almost pleading, but keeping his voice firm. She shook her head. "No, you can't. You can give gifts, you can give luxury, you can give trips, but you can't give back what you took. Their childhood with their father." Her words echoed in his mind like hammer strikes. Even so, he refused to drop his guard. Inside him, 2 forces battled, the crushing guilt and the pride that clung to survival. He inhaled deeply and tried his last weapon, the one that always worked in any deal. "I'm rich. I can give them a future you'll never be able to." This time, it wasn't her who answered. It was the middle boy, his voice innocent but steady. "We don't want a future that's bought. We just wanted a dad." The millionaire froze. The ground seemed to vanish beneath him. His pride, no matter how loud it screamed, was crushed by a truth no amount of money could silence. She laid a hand on her son's shoulder and finished. "You hear that? It's not money that's missing. It's you. And that emptiness, you chose it." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the wind seemed to stop and listen. He dropped his eyes, beaten by the words of children and the dignity of a woman who refused to bow before his fortune. Pride still burned, but no longer had the strength to hold up the lie. In that instant, he understood. All his power meant nothing here. The millionaire said nothing. His chest rose and fell fast, as if he'd run miles. He wanted to argue, to fight back, but every word seemed too small in front of those children and her steady resolve. And then, as if fate had planned the exact moment, a voice rose behind him. "I knew it would come to this." He turned slowly. It was Mrs. Helena, the old neighbor from the street where he grew up. An elderly woman with gray hair, her apron still dusted with flour, fresh from the bakery she had run for years. She rested her hands on her hips, her eyes filled with disappointment and pity. "Do you remember me?" she asked. He stammered, "Yes, Mrs. Helena." She nodded, but her stare was sharp. "I saw when you started with nothing. I saw this girl here, pregnant, with no one to help, washing clothes until midnight. I saw when she came home crying because there was nothing to eat, while carrying 3 boys in her belly. And I saw you, driving past in your new car, pretending you didn't see." The people gathered closer. The millionaire wanted to step back, but there was no way out. The past itself was testifying against him in broad daylight. "That's not fair, Mrs. Helena." He tried to defend himself. I didn't know how to deal with it." She raised her voice, firm. "Fair? Fair would have been owning up to your choices. Fair would have been not leaving this woman alone, broke when she needed you most. Money you have plenty of now, but character isn't for sale." The weight of her words fell like a hammer. His legs trembled. Then another face appeared in the crowd, Mr. Joachim, an old friend of his father's, owner of a mechanic shop. "I remember too. You once brought your new car for me to fix. And I asked you myself, what about the girl who was always with you? You brushed it off, said you had something better. I never forgot." The millionaire closed his eyes. The witnesses multiplied, as if time itself had summoned every memory to put him on trial right there. The boys were stunned. The oldest, brave, asked, "Is it true, Mom? Did this man know Dad?" She lowered her eyes, moved by emotion, and stroked her son's cheek. "Yes, they knew each other. But the man you see now isn't the same one I once knew." The millionaire felt as if something inside him had been torn apart. He tried to speak, but his voice failed. He looked at the boys, at the crowd, at her, and nothing seemed enough. Then came the final blow. Mrs. Helena lifted a worn notebook yellowed with age. "I thought one day you'd need to see this," she said. It was an old notebook of notes. He recognized it right away. The first drafts of calculations, plans, business ideas he had jotted down during sleepless nights. The pages were full of scribbles, and alongside them a different handwriting. Neat, ordered, clear. "These are her notes," Mrs. Helena said. "She would rewrite what you wrote so you wouldn't get lost. She believed in you more than anyone." His hands trembled as he took the notebook. He flipped through it slowly. There were the ideas, the numbers, and next to them her lines. "You can do it. Don't give up now. One day we'll laugh about this." Tears came without asking. He tried to hold them back but couldn't. It was indisputable proof that none of it would have been possible without her. It was proof that his fortune had roots in hands he had abandoned. The youngest, curious, looked at the notebook and asked, "Did Mom write this?" She nodded, holding back her sobs. "I did. Because I believed he would make it. I just didn't imagine that when he did, he would forget me." He snapped the notebook shut as if he couldn't stand to look at it anymore. The witnesses, the neighbors, his own conscience, all were shouting the same truth. He stood before the final verdict. There was no denying it. Those boys were his. That woman had been the foundation of everything, and he had chosen to destroy what mattered most. The silence that followed was devastating. He looked at her and saw not hatred, but something worse: indifference. She no longer expected anything from him. That was the deepest defeat of all. He stood there with the notebook in his hands, heart racing, tears blurring his vision. The pages trembled between his fingers like quiet accusations. Every line she had written felt like a knife in his conscience. He raised his eyes and found the three boys staring at him. There was no hate, no open judgment, only raw, innocent curiosity. That hurt more than anything. The oldest, steady, stepped forward. "So, are you our father?" The question hung in the air. The millionaire felt his legs give out. He swallowed, but no sound came. He looked at her as if asking permission, but her face was unreadable, impenetrable. The silence stretched until the middle boy, frowning, added, "If you're our dad, why were you never with us?" People around held their breath. Even the birds seemed to hush. The millionaire brought his hand to his face, trying to bear the weight of that innocence. He always had ready excuses for executives, partners, politicians, but in front of a child, there was no defense. He stammered. I was wrong." The words tore out of him, raw with a pain he hadn't known he still carried, but the boys didn't understand right away. The little one, with the plainness of his age, asked in a small voice, "You don't like us?" That question pierced his heart like a spear. He fell to his knees, unable to stay standing before such doubt. "No, it's not that," he cried, tears finally overflowing. "I wasn't there, not because I didn't love you. I was cowardly. His ex closed her eyes, holding back emotion. The boys, confused, didn't know whether to come closer or step back. The oldest looked at his mother for answers. She spoke, voice breaking but firm. "He wasn't here because he chose not to be. Don't mistake that for your fault. You were never the problem. The problem was always him." The millionaire sobbed, clutching the notebook to his chest. "I should have stayed. I should have been the man I promised to be." Mrs. Helena, still close by, murmured, "Broken promises hurt more than knives." The atmosphere was unbearable. The crowd was moved. Some people cried quietly. Then the middle boy, eyes wet, let out, "If you're our dad, why now? Why did you only come to talk to us now?" The millionaire had no answer. He just shook his head, defeated. At that moment, the youngest, still puzzled, put his small hand on his shoulder and said, "Can we call you Dad, or will you leave again?" Rivers of tears streamed down his face. He couldn't take any more. He tried to hug the boy, but she pulled her son close, raising her wall of protection. "Not so fast," she said. "Words don't erase years of emptiness. They don't need another broken promise." Silence fell again, heavy. On his knees, he no longer looked like the powerful man everyone knew. He was just someone begging for a second chance that might never come. The oldest, serious, looked him straight in the eye and said, "We already grew up without you. Don't try to be a dad just because you finally realized what you lost." Those words were the final blow. The millionaire collapsed onto the curb, the notebook still pressed to his chest, stripped of all the arrogance he once wore like armor. And, for the first time, he understood. He wasn't the one in control of this story. The climax was there, in front of everyone. A wealthy man reduced to moral ruins, staring at three boys who carried his blood, but not his history. He stayed seated on the sidewalk, too weak to stand. The old notebook, stained with time and tears, clung to his chest. He no longer resembled the man from magazine covers, from arrogant speeches, from interviews praising his meteoric rise. Right there, in plain view, he was nothing but a broken man. She looked at him, her heart torn. Part of her still carried the deep wound of being left behind, pregnant and alone. But another part, the part that held three boys' hands every day, knew she couldn't let bitterness consume her. She had to be strong. She had to show that dignity isn't for sale. She stepped forward and spoke, her voice calm but firm enough for all to hear. "Don't expect please from me. I don't want your money. I don't want your pity. I just want you to understand what it means to be responsible for the choices you made." He lifted his face, eyes red, body hunched. "I get it. I understand now. But what if it's too late?" She sighed. "For the past, yes, it is too late. What you lost won't come back. Every night, every first step, every birthday, every hug you could have given, all of that is gone. But the future, that still exists. Only it doesn't depend on me. It depends on what you're willing to do from now on." The boys listened closely. The oldest, solemn like an adult, seemed to absorb every word. The middle one still clutched his backpack as if it were a shield. The youngest, not fully understanding, looked at the man before him with a mix of curiosity and compassion. Then the littlest stepped closer, ignoring the tension. He placed his hand on the millionaire's knee and whispered, "You don't need to cry. If you want, you can play with us someday." His heart shattered. Such a simple, pure offer from someone who shouldn't have to carry that weight. He lowered his head and wept again, unashamed. She closed her eyes briefly. That gesture from her son touched her deeply, but it also made her realize something. Forgiveness wouldn't come from her. It would come from them, and children's forgiveness cannot be bought. It has to be earned day by day. The oldest pulled his brother back. "It's not that easy. He doesn't know how to be a dad." The millionaire lifted his head, looked at the boy, and with a trembling voice admitted, "You're right, I don't know, but I want to learn." The silence was thick. She studied him for a moment, then replied, "If that's true, don't say it. Prove it, and be ready to hear no. Because trust isn't born in a day. It takes years, and they have every right not to believe a word you say now." He nodded, defeated, yet relieved to hear there was at least a crack of hope. "I won't walk away again," he said, almost like an oath. The boys exchanged glances. The youngest smiled shyly. The middle one bit his lip, thoughtful. The oldest stayed stern, but his eyes betrayed the doubt. Would this time be any different? The crowd, which had been whispering, began to scatter. The public spectacle was over. Only they remained in the dusty street, carrying years of history tied into one single moment. She adjusted her bag on her shoulder and called her sons. "Come on, life doesn't wait." The three moved toward her. The youngest looked back one last time and waved to the millionaire. "Bye, mister, or dad. I'm not sure." The millionaire's legs trembled again, but that small wave felt like a spark, lighting something inside him. For the first time in years, he longed not just to be admired, but to be worthy of the heaviest, simplest title of all, father. She started walking with the children, never looking back. He stayed on his knees, watching, and in that moment, he understood the lesson life had carved into him. Money buys houses, cars, power, but it doesn't buy the right to be remembered with love. His heart, crushed by conscience, had finally begun to learn the only truth that mattered. Being rich is not enough. You have to be human. The millionaire stayed seated on the curb, frozen, even after she walked away with the boys. The sun was sinking on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. The street, once crowded with onlookers, was now almost empty. Only the echo of her words and the shy wave of the youngest son remained. He drew in deep breaths, trying to gather his thoughts. For the first time in years, his mind wasn't on numbers, contracts, or deals. It was on faces. 3 faces just like his own, but carrying a void no amount of money could ever fill. The notebook was still in his hands. Its worn pages were a living reminder of the one who had believed in him when no one else did. He opened it again and read a line she had written years earlier. "Wealth only matters if you can share it with the ones you love." Tears returned. How many times had he ignored that simple truth, convincing himself that success was measured in bank balances and the applause of strangers? How many times had he traded genuine embraces for empty toasts at meaningless parties? In that moment, He realized the greatest bankruptcy of his life wasn't in business, but in his heart. Slowly, he stood. Dust from the pavement stained his expensive suit, but he no longer cared. He walked to his car, yet didn't get in. Instead, he stood there, staring at his reflection in the glass. He saw a man who looked flawless on the outside, but with eyes completely wrecked. And he asked himself, what good is it to be a millionaire if I failed as a human being? Her words came back like a sentence. Money doesn't buy the past, and it doesn't buy respect. That line would haunt him forever. Meanwhile, at another corner, the boys walked beside their mother. The youngest, still puzzled, asked, "Mom, is he coming back?" She sighed, stroking his hair. "I don't know, sweetheart, but if he does, he'll have to prove he's changed." The oldest stayed silent, deep in thought, glancing back one last time before moving on. The middle one, curious, clung to his mother's arm, as if trying to figure out what would happen next. Life would carry on, but something had shifted. The millionaire couldn't erase the past, but for the first time he seemed willing to face its consequences. The story closes like a mirror for anyone watching. How often do people trade what truly matters for the glitter of what fades? How often are promises broken in the name of ambitions that look grand, but leave scars that never heal? The millionaire learned too late that money buys comfort, but not love. It buys recognition, but not respect. Real wealth isn't in numbers, but in bonds. The gaze of those three boys, identical to him, was the final proof. What we abandon eventually comes back to confront us, sometimes with tears, sometimes with silence, but always with a weight no fortune can ease. And now, the audience must ask themselves, what's the point of conquering the whole world if, in the end, you lose the right to be remembered with love by the ones who matter most? The final image is powerful. A rich man in an expensive suit standing alone on the sidewalk, clutching an old notebook to his chest with tears in his eyes. And in the distance, three children walking hand in hand with their mother, because their love never depended on money, only on present. That is the real lesson. Wealth without character is just poverty in disguise. And no bank account can buy back what you lose when you turn your back on the person who believed in you. And now I want to hear from you, who followed this story until the end. Do you believe the millionaire deserves a second chance with the boys, or do you think some choices can never be undone? Write your opinion in the comments. Your perspective might inspire others to reflect as well. And if this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next ones.